This is an ODB Films production. Visit odbfilms.com today.
In Latin, Renovo means to renew, restore, or revive. This show is all about growing in our understanding and practice of faith. Past episodes are available wherever you like to listen to podcasts. I'm Doug Tuke, the Vice President of Ministry Advancement at ODB Films. And today, we're going to look at a topic that's not very fun, divorce. And I picked it because I've had listeners ask me extensively about the tribunal and the Catholic Church's understanding of annulment and what all of that means. Also, just in the face of a massive trend on the part of young people who just no longer want to be married in churches. Now, that's endemic of a lot of things, like we have no faith community, we don't practice the faith anyway, we don't want to do marriage prep for something we don't believe in. I understand all of that, but there's also kind of a powerful commentary there. I have daughters, I have children, and my kids are getting older, and we've been to lots of weddings, a lot of which were not Catholic. And I know that at the end of it, I take the time as a parent to unpack that with my kids. Like, do you know the difference? Do you understand the difference between this wedding that you saw in a church and then this one that you saw in someone's backyard where their friend was the witness? And we talk about it. And we talk about it because I think if you don't talk about it, my daughters will never have that perspective. They'll never realize, oh no, why does this matter? All of this matters in the context of a conversation about divorce because it's awful. I mean, it's everywhere. Those of you that are divorced, it's difficult. And I mean, that's the understatement of the century. My heart goes out to the difficulty and the struggle that you've navigated, and my prayers go to you in strength. Many of you that are divorced have had those trials and have journeyed through them and journeyed through faith. And it has been the greatest blessing in your life to not have that relationship that was poisonous or toxic or even physically painful a part of your life anymore. That's a little different than not understanding the ramifications of marriage in the first place and the beauty of the sacrament in the first place. So that's why we're doing the show. I wanted to really dig in to the high standard of relationship that the church really holds to, even in the midst of being massively unpopular. That's what's going on. And we all know there's a lot of people that are angry with the Catholic Church. And sometimes I get it. It's because of totally inexcusable faults and sins of certain Catholic leaders, ordained and lay people. I get it. I understand. But a lot of times the church's teaching, that it's what people find offensive, especially its moral teaching. And the church's, it's very clear prohibition of premarital and extramarital sex. It's rejection of homosexual marriage, not homosexuals, but the idea of homosexual marriage. And we'll get into that a little bit. Rejection of abortion and contraception. That makes a lot of people's blood boil. And to that, I say, I don't actually really care if that makes you super angry, because there's a lot of beauty in the language of Christ behind those teachings. Those are not just archaic teachings. Those are scriptural teachings. And here's the thing about divorce specifically in a society with a 50% divorce rate, the insistence that marriage is forever. I get that can seem outdated, that it can seem heartless and judgmental. However, the Catholic Church comes from Jesus specifically. And sometimes critics say, well, Jesus accepted everyone, even the woman caught in adultery, John 8, 1 through 11. What the heck is your deal? Why are you like this? And I understand that. But in Mark 10, 2 through 16, this very gentle, accepting Jesus very bluntly states that divorce was never part of God's perfect plan. The man who divorces his wife and marries another commits adultery against her. And that sounds really harsh to a lot of ears. But for 2,000 years, the Catholic Church has labored to be faithful to its founder's word in its teaching and the indissolubility of bond between husband and wife, not to damage husband and wife, but to raise so highly the bar of that union. Now, critics right away, wait a minute, isn't the church being hypocritical here? Does it not practice the granting of annulments, just a way of approving through fancy canon legal maneuvering what it denies in its official teaching? If you know the right people, can't you just go buy a church-approved divorce? Sounds like they're Pharisees, right? Just stop for a second and ask what makes a marriage. Is it a legal ceremony, a government license? Is it a church ceremony with organ candles, priests, lots of flowers? Is it the bodily union of the partners? This is where the conversation needs to evolve. The Catholic Church teaches that while all these are super, super important, none of them is what cements the marital bond. Marriage is a covenant, a relationship established through the free, informed consent of both people. It happens when two people who are free to marry are physically and emotionally capable of marriage, give themselves fully to each other, understanding that marriage means openness to life and commitment to exclusive and faithful love till death. That's what marriage is. When that happens between two unbaptized people, a natural marriage bond is formed, and that is greatly respected by the Catholic Church. When it happens between two baptized persons, the Holy Spirit is poured out, and the natural bond is elevated to a supernatural sacramental bond. Sacramental marriage matters. It matters because you're saying it's not just about us two, it's about us three. It's about Christ at the center of the union, an eternal union. So the natural blessings of marriage are the companionship, mutual support, the intimacy of the spouses, plus the possibility of sharing in God's creative, life-giving work, the procreation and formation of children. In a sacramental marriage, there's an additional goal. The spouses accept the vocation to be really a prophetic, visible sign of this unbreakable covenant between Christ and his church. That language matters. It matters today as much as it mattered when it was really starting to be articulated thousands of years ago. And I get how unpopular that is, and it doesn't matter that it's unpopular. That bond, that relationship, the salvation of family that can come from that relationship really is concrete. And I think it's intimidating. I think it's intimidating to young couples who are now seeing that 50+% destruction of marriage and thinking, oh, I guess this just doesn't matter as much as I thought maybe it did. And that just isn't true. That's really, in many ways, it's just kind of evil to think that it doesn't have the value that it once had. It truly does. We have to uphold that value and really consider that, especially for young people that are entering into relationships. This is forever. This is sacramental. This is Christ at the center. It should be a big deal when you get married, not a whim. It is forever. It's a beautiful union. Now, in all kinds of cases, okay, God has joined the couple, right? And the two have become one. In the first case, on a really natural level, and in the second, on a both natural and supernatural level. So how can the church allow for annulments? What are these things? Aren't these exceptions to the rule? Isn't that unacceptable? Be careful here. First of all, Jesus and St. Paul note some exceptions to the absolute prohibition of remarriage of the divorced. See Matthew 5:32 and 19:9. See 1 Corinthians 7:15. Okay, so why is this? Because it's possible for people to go through a ceremony without the marriage bond actually being forged. Perhaps one person entered into marriage with no intention of ever being open to children. In the contraceptive society that we live in, is that even surprising, right? Perhaps one of the partners married not freely, but under pressure, let's say, of a pregnancy or from the family. When the church declares that the two people involved of a failed marriage are free to marry again in the Catholic Church, it usually means that the circumstances of the failed marriage were examined thoroughly by a group of church experts, and it was determined that the marriage bond was never truly formed. Now, those who've experienced the tragedy of divorce, the difficulty of it, and feel alienated from the church, you need to know how you are loved by Christ and the church. And I know what I'm saying when I say that. I know that parishes can seem inhospitable. I know that there is tension there. I get it. That is not church teaching. That is dumb people. Okay, that's not church teaching. You need to, I hope you'll seek counsel. And where appropriate, I hope you initiate an examination of the failed marriage by church authorities. We're going to get into the details of that in just a minute. But please know you are loved. You are not excluded. That's not scriptural. That's not church teaching. Now, for those of you who are married or contemplating marriage, know that the church's teaching comes from the Lord himself, and that it is a testimony not to some sort of old-fashioned prudishness, but rather to the power and the beauty of a state in life that points well beyond itself to heaven, to salvation. There's more to marriage than a civil union. There just is, sacramentally as well as civilly. Okay. Now let's dispel some myths. There's a lot of myths about marriage annulments in the Catholic Church. Let's just break through some of them so that there's some more clarity. That's what the show is really all about. Myth number one: a divorced person is automatically excommunicated from the Catholic Church. That is completely false. The truth is that divorce itself does not affect or alter a person's status in the Catholic Church. Divorce is a function of the civil law and secular courts. Although it has been a widespread misconception for a lot of years, it is a myth that a divorced Catholic is quote unquote excommunicated. This is not able to receive sacraments within the church. That is false. That is not true. That is nowhere in church teaching. Okay. I challenge that. Any priest that tells you that needs to read more. Okay. They're wrong. Myth number two: an annulment costs thousands of dollars. That's not true either. The truth is that no tribunal anywhere in the world asks for thousands of dollars, although the fee requested for an annulment process does vary from one tribunal to another. In most dioceses, the requested fee ranges from $100 to about $500, depending on the type of case. But the fee the petitioner pays, the person who's seeking the annulment, is only about 1/2 of the tribunal's actual cost for a case. Remember, this is canon law. There is canon legal documents and legal processes that do cost money. It's not just a bunch of free paperwork, okay? It's a myth that the process costs thousands of bucks. And in fact, no one is ever turned away from a tribunal because of their inability to pay a fee. So be aware of that. Myth number three: only Catholic marriages need to be annulled. The truth is that every marriage is considered a promise for life, a promise until death. It makes no difference whether that promise was made in a Catholic ceremony or not. No one, no matter what their religious affiliation or membership, is considered free to contract another marriage if they were married previously. I'm not talking about polygamy here. I'm not even going to get into that. Any organization that accepts polygamy is not considered a religion by the United States of America. So just be aware of that. Every prior marriage must be investigated and annulled before a person can enter a new marriage. It is a myth that no annulment is required if a person wasn't married in a Catholic ceremony. And this is for the benefit of the petitioner. And we'll talk more about that in this show. Okay. Myth number four: if an annulment is granted, the children will be considered kind of illegitimate. And that's just completely false. The truth is that an ecclesiastical annulment is concerned only with the spouses, not the children. So an annulment has no effect at all on the legitimacy of children or other arrangements regarding children, such as custody or support. These are all concerns of the civil law. So an ecclesiastical annulment has absolutely no effects under civil law. Okay, it's a myth that granting an annulment makes the children considered illegitimate. That's not true at all. Another one, it takes 3 to 5 years to get an annulment. Now, the truth is that every annulment case is different. It's impossible to say otherwise. And some processes are a lot longer than others, but very few cases ever take more than 18 months from start to finish. Now, decades ago, it did take several years, but today the longest process is usually finished in 9 to 18 months. Some types of cases can be finished in a month or even less. So it's a myth that the typical marriage annulment takes 3 years or more to complete, although some tribunals are extremely backed up. And this leads to another conversation about the need for more laity to step up and engage the study of canon law. This might be a topic for another show, but there is a tremendous opportunity there for lay canon experts to help with this process. It will truly bring a lot of men and women, adult men and women, back into the folds of the faith. Okay. Another myth: anyone who applies and waits long enough will get an annulment. That's really not true. The truth is that tribunals do give negative decisions. So the burden of proving a case really rests on the petitioner, the one wanting the annulment. That is the person who applies for the annulment. Okay. So the Catholic Church presumes that every marriage is a valid union, and there must be sufficient grounds for declaring it otherwise. The tribunal will help the petitioner to understand what's needed to develop a case. But if there isn't enough proof, the tribunal will give a negative decision. It's a myth that everyone applies just gets one. So there's a lot of stewing. There's a lot of research there, a lot of really evaluating the marriage. And please understand, I get emotionally, I can see where that is extremely difficult, but it's also extremely important to very sincerely discern the marriage and to think about whether the sacrament was present or not. That's very important. Okay. Myth number 7, if children were born in the marriage, it can't be annulled. That's not true. The truth is that the Catholic Church considers an openness to children to be a natural and an absolutely essential part of sacramental marriage. But whether any children were actually born or not has no bearing on the possibility of an annulment. If children were born, it's important that both parents live up to their natural and legal obligations to their children. It's a myth, however, that a marriage can't be annulled if the marriage resulted in children. Okay. Another one, the ex-spouse has to agree to an annulment or it can't be granted. The truth is that both spouses have equal rights in an annulment proceeding, but that doesn't mean that the respondent, the ex-spouse of the person who starts the annulment process, has to agree to an annulment. The truth is that the tribunal judges can grant an annulment even if the ex-spouse is adamantly opposed to the idea of an annulment. It's a myth that both spouses have to agree to an annulment. And that's really important for those of you that are in those tense and extremely difficult situations regarding annulment. Okay. Myth number 9, an annulment is just Catholic divorce. And this is really what the podcast is about. The truth is that civil divorce and a church annulment are two vastly different things. A divorce is concerned with the legal realities of a marriage only. An annulment is concerned with the religious and the spiritual element, the sacrament of marriage. So a divorce focuses on the end of a marriage. An annulment looks at the beginning, the very moment the couple said, I do. A divorce looks at marriage in civil law. An annulment looks at marriage from the perspective of the gospel and of church doctrine. It's a myth that an annulment is divorce Catholic style. That's not true at all. Myth number 10, an annulment means the marriage never took place. Tread lightly here. The truth is that an annulment can't erase history, and it doesn't try to. An annulment is the Catholic Church deals only with the sacrament of marriage and not the legal, like we talked about, the historical, emotional truth of a marriage. So an annulment states that the sacrament was never present in the marriage and not that the marriage never took place. It's a myth that an annulment means that the marriage never happened. That's just not the right language. Myth number 11, the tribunal is like a courtroom with judges, witnesses, lawyers, and cross-examinations. Not true. The truth is that the tribunal is a court of law for the church, a court of canon law, but it's very different from a civil courtroom. So depending on the type of case, the spouses may have advocates and there will be 1 to 3 judges, but most of the work is done in writing and there's never an emotional courtroom scene like in TV, okay? If a person appears in person to offer testimony, it's usually done in a private interview and never with cross-examination. So it's a myth that the tribunal is like a TV courtroom, all right? And the last one, myth number 12, the idea of an annulment is pure legalism in the Catholic Church. It's just legalism for the sake of legalism. This is false. If you think that or if you've heard that, you got to read more. The truth is that annulment is packaged in a legal environment, since that's the best way to protect the rights and the interest of everyone involved. But it is far more than just a legalistic process. People who've gone through an annulment have actually found a ton of peace and insight into themselves and their marriages. It's a myth that the only concern of the church is an annulment is legalism. But through the tribunal process, the church invites you to find healing, forgiveness, new joy in a new life. It's really conversion. It's a open door to conversion for those petitioners. And for more information about that, just contact your local parish communities so that healing can begin. Here's the deal. The sacraments make Christ present in our midst, visible signs of God's invisible grace, right? So like all the other sacraments, marriage, it's not just for the good of individuals or the couple, but for the community as a whole, the faith community. So the Catholic Church teaches that marriage between 2 baptized persons is a sacrament. This matters. The Old Testament prophets saw the marriage of a man and a woman as a symbol of the covenant relationship between God and his people, nothing less. So the permanent and exclusive union between husband and wife really mirrors the mutual commitment between God and his people. The letter to the Ephesians says that this union, Paul says this, is a symbol of the relationship between Christ and the church. Now, I get it. I get the trend among young people to not get married in a church. A lot of this is just laziness, but a lot of it, I don't want to do the formation. I don't want to, oh my gosh, I can't believe you make it so hard. There's so many hoops. That's fine. If it's not important to you to have Christ in your marriage, that's not important to you in this way, that's fine. But a lot of it comes from a feeling of unwelcome or a lack of faith community in the first place. And that's where all of us can step in. Marriage is hard. Marriage is a daily recommitment to each other and the challenges of navigating life as one unified couple. I get it. We get it. My advice to a young couple seeking marriage is you're going to want all the help you can get. And a lot of this comes from placing Christ at the very center of your union. And this too can be difficult. It can be difficult. Is there even a conversation of faith in your marriage couple? My wife, Becky, and I, deeply, madly in love, 18 years of marriage, 5 kids. It's hard. I found a prayer that I pray every day, actually. I found a prayer that really helps bless our marriage. And I'll be really honest with you. My wife and I are not super good at praying together as much as we should. We certainly pray with our kids. We certainly are bringing our young people to engage the sacraments. But between the two of it, we are not as vocal about it as we can. But I know that this prayer has brought me a ton of peace and opened up a lot of spiritual doors between my wife and I. And it goes like this. I offer you this prayer to help me with my marriage. Lord, please take away all the pain and hurt in my heart. Fill it with love, joy, patience, and understanding. Bless me and my wife so that we may never surrender to whatever challenges that come our way. Fill our hearts with love for each other, and may you make each one of us realize each other's worth. Please touch the heart of my wife. Fill it with much love for me. Make our complicated relationship become uncomplicated. I seek for your mercy and blessing that you may allow us to spend the rest of our lives with each other. Please make this feeling mutual for both of us. Lead us not into temptations. Guide us wherever we go. Always put us in each other's heart and mind. Thank you, Lord, for hearing my prayer. I love you. Amen. I hope that prayer can bless you if you're in a difficult situation. And I hope that all of you that are divorced or have had divorce affect your life know first and foremost that the teachings of the church on divorce exist for your salvation, your sanctity, your healing, and your conversion. And I hope that you'll be filled with the strength, if need be, to seek those annulments or to encourage others to seek that healing for the sake of their heart in moving forward. And those of you that are in difficult marriages, I hope that God's graces absolutely drench your relationship and that transparency and communication can come forth and bring healing to you. Thanks for listening. Sincerely, we are partners in the journey of faith. I hope you'll share this Renovo podcast with friends and foes, and certainly for those of you that are engaging difficult times in your marriage. Please send your topic suggestions, questions, and/or comments to doug@odbfilms.com. Always remember to engage the tradition and live the conversion. Until next time, God bless.